The United States of the early 60s saw a new generation of Americans, suspicious of traditional authority. The atmosphere was ripe for L. Ron Hubbard, a sci-fi writer gone spiritual leader, to spread his promises of do-it-yourself healing to the people.
We live in a world where we have governments and we have societies and so forth who are desperately trying to help man. They are trying, however, to solve his problems for him.
By 1960, Hubbard had taken Dianetics one step further and founded the Church of Scientology. A cross appeared on Hubbard's buildings. His writings became scriptures, and his students parishioners.
It was an alternative therapy, a non-recognized alternative mental therapy. But Hubbard actually made us start wearing ministers' uniforms and put up the trappings of religion around so that the IRS would get off his case.
But Hubbard contended that since his work dealt with man as spirit separate from his body, he had entered the realm of religion.
We have a 2,000-year history of man as a spirit, whereas we only have less than a century of considering simply mud. And therefore, my study is more traditional than most philosophies.
Hubbard and his upstart religion provoked contempt.
Hubbard had been kicking over rocks and exposing things, and the government didn't like him, and the communists didn't like him, and Nixon didn't like him, and he had all these big enemies.
The church outlined these enemies in its publication, Freedom magazine. Freedom proudly published exposés on bizarre psychiatric practices, including what it called psychiatric work camps in South Africa and a strange deep sleep therapy in England.
He talked about the secret program that was being conducted by the intelligence community using psychiatrists called MK Ultra that we finally found out about it, but it was using drugs and hypnosis in order to create, in essence, a Manchurian candidate.
While Hubbard went after the government went after him. In 1967, the IRS revoked the Church of Scientology's tax exemption, stating that Scientology was a commercial, not religious organization. Hubbard lived in luxury and was suspected of skimming huge sums of money from the church. He immediately became the subject of an IRS probe into his financial dealings. Outraged, Hubbard began penning a number of policy letters on how to deal with Scientology's enemies.
The fair game policy refers to utterly destroying any critics, that a Scientologist can do whatever is required to destroy a critic. And the fair game policy is one of the policy letters in that series of documents that also include how to conduct a noisy investigation, black propaganda. In the Manual of Justice, he writes, the purpose of the lawsuit is not to harass, but to destroy.
Attorney Ford Green, a former follower of Sun Myung Moon, says Scientology's policies did not come as a surprise.
All cults draw a dichotomy between those on the inside and those on the outside, where those on the outside are lesser people and are treated by a whole different system of morality that can justify misconduct from cheating, lying, to killing. Scientology calls it fair game. The Unification Church can call it heavenly deception.
It became misinterpreted. And what it said was that if someone has left the Church of Scientology, or if someone is directly attacking the Church of Scientology, that person no longer has recourse to the internal ethics and justice procedures within the church. It was canceled. But for PR reasons, because it had been being misinterpreted.
But ex-members claim that the militaristic policies remained.
You have to understand that the mentality of the organization is that it's first of all, it's built on a military model. It's not a religious model. He's got policy letters that are called battle tactics, right? And there are battle plans.
Hubbard's battle plan was executed by the Guardian's office, set up in 1966 to deal with Scientology foes. Hubbard, who had officially resigned as formal head of the church in 1966, put his wife, Mary Sue, in charge. But ex-members say Hubbard was still in charge.
They were on Hubbard's intelligence agency. That was their purpose. And indeed, an intelligence specialist in the US has said that they were as effective as the CIA.
In 1973, the Guardian's office implemented a program known as Operation Snow White. The group began to use the Freedom of Information Act to access government files, and it proved federal agencies were circulating lies about the church.
He dreamed up a conspiracy to explain all this problem, and he created a top secret program called Snow White to uncover and find the source of this conspiracy.
But Scientology did indeed uncover some bizarre documents in government files.
At one point, there was a document that said, aha, we have discovered Timothy Leary knows a man called Alfred Hubbard. Alfred Hubbard obviously is L. Ron Hubbard. Therefore, perhaps L. Ron Hubbard is really Timothy Leary, and that there is money from LSD being channeled into the Church of Scientology. I mean, this is how absurd these reports were. There was this constant barrage of assaults coming from these government agencies. So the Guardian's office was set up in order to deal with those external-facing matters of the church.
The target of media scrutiny and under investigation by tax authorities, Scientology's founder evaded growing hostility against him by purchasing a yacht and taking to sea.
He went off to begin a project of further research. He took with him a few very dedicated members of the religion, which became the nucleus of what we now know today as the Sea Organization. The most dedicated members of the religion are members of the Sea Organization. They dedicate their entire lives to accomplishing the goals and objectives of Scientology.
It's the people who sign a billion-year contract to come back lifetime after lifetime serving Hubbard.
On the ship, Hubbard enhanced his bridge to total freedom, creating new levels above that of clear. Hubbard acquired more ships to accommodate the Sea Organization. The secrecy surrounding Hubbard's mini flotilla did not help Scientology's reputation abroad.
Not only had to leave the United States, he finally had to leave the United Kingdom, and then he was kicked out of Greece. He couldn't even land his ship after a while.
The animosity culminated in Portugal in 1975.
A whole bunch of people were in the streets, and someone got them all hyped up, and they filled up a bunch of taxis with rocks, and they went down to the Apollo, and they started stoning the ship. It was a time of incredible upheaval and upset, and people in the streets, and this rumor went around. It went like wildfire. Pretty soon you're seeing on walls in the harbors, Apollo equals CIA, Apollo equals CIA. Frankly, we all thought it was pretty amusing. Like, the last people in the world to be accused of being the CIA is the Church of Scientology. We had been in a pitched battle with the CIA since 1950.
After the incident, Hubbard returned to land, determined to uncover the source of the hostility against Scientology.
What do you do when you're under assault? What do you do when you're being attacked by the biggest governments in the world? And this is not paranoia. How do you respond? How do you deal with it? Yes, there were a number of directives that were written. Ultimately, when you're in a battle with the United States government, for an example, if it's simply a war of attrition, there's no doubt who's going to win a war of attrition.
And the war was just beginning. When Investigative Reports returns, the Church of Scientology does battle with the FBI and an author who dares to attack their motives.